Hi guys. We apologize for a late episode again because of other other commitments that we had. We weren't able to publish anything on YouTube, and also we apologize that we wouldn't be able to upload an episode on 4K today because we usually use our mom's phone for that, and she is gone, and my phone does not have enough battery, or does it have enough memory for us to record on 4K. And today's conversation would be an interesting one as we're going to delve into the mess that the disintegrating British Raj left behind for the countries that it eventually came out of it and the neighboring countries as well. And our primary focus would be on the Radcliffe line and the McMahon line.
Yeah, I
And
mean, I think the focus of our
yeah,
conversation today is going to be how the poor colonial legacy of border management stays with the modern Indian Republic.
yes,
I think we felt like having this conversation because I think on the 18th of December, India's National Security Advisor Ajit Doval, he met the Chinese Foreign Minister, and a kind of resolutionary framework has been set for the future to sort of manage the existing border dispute in Ladakh, the LAC areas, and even the issues that arise in the McMahon line. So there's kind of a resolutionary process which is coming in between the two countries. So Jay and I just thought we'll trace a bit of the history of what led to the creation of what became the line of actual control, what led to the creation of what became the McMahon line, how much do we actually control on the ground, and this is again just a conversation. Neither of us are pretending to be experts on the border disputes. There's a lot more detailed content in many defense and policy media outlets. If that is your interest, you should go check those out. We'll try to link some in our description. But yeah, Jay, let's give some historical context to ourselves and our viewers.
Tibetan Plateau is one of the highest points that are occupied by humans on this planet. It is a very hostile environment to live on, and it is considered as like the genesis of a lot of Sino-Tibetan groups which occupy huge parts of the Indian subcontinent as well, specifically towards the northeast. And that's why historically, the Tibetan Plateau is one of the most important cultural hotspots for Asia in general because it is considered to be the hospice of civilization. And before we come into the modern ideas of the geopolitical context, when the McMahon line was drawn in 1914, Tibet was a sovereign empire, and it wasn't under the hegemony of the Chinese state. And China was in itself going through a lot of problems. There was a massive struggle between the nationalists and the communists, and eventually the communists took over in 1949. And it's after that finally in 1959 you had the Chinese occupy most of Tibet. So there was a similar convention that was signed between
In
the erstwhile
1914.
in 1914 between the erstwhile British Raj and the Tibetan Empire. And under the Simla Agreement, they basically finalized the geopolitical boundary line between the British Empire and the Tibetan Empire.
Yeah, I mean, so it was drawn by the British in 1914, and it was negotiated by Sir Henry McMahon, who I think at the time was the British Foreign Secretary, and he was the British representative at the Simla Convention. I think what the Chinese today contest is that the Tibetans had no authority to negotiate that boundary as a sovereign sort of sovereign like statement. You know, the Tibetans had no legal authority to claim that that is the boundary for what later
Yeah,
became the
because
Chinese nation state.
because the Chinese always claimed that Tibet was historically their part, and it's under this Han domination of that area. They wanted to go back to the old setup, which had you know that area under say the Qing domination.
Yeah, and I mean even to this day the Chinese refer to, I think, Arunachal Pradesh as South Tibet.
Yeah.
So there's a legacy of these negotiations that both the Chinese have inherited maybe from the Tibetans in those days, and the Indians have inherited from the British. So it's interesting how that border dispute is carried on into the modern Republic of India. There is also a loss of clarity in how the different and varying perceptions in the Ladakh area lead to patrolling in both the countries, and that in is one of the factors that has always led to conflict and confrontation between the Indian Army and ITBP from our side, and maybe the PLA from that side. So, Jay, let's discuss a little bit about Ladakh and the LAC. It's a hostile terrain, it's a difficult to administer terrain.
Yes.
So,
So by 1962, we all know that the Indian
hmm,
forces and the Chinese military came at blows over what could be considered as like uh, the officially recognized border between the two states, and because of this confusion and the obfuscation which the Indian state was carrying with itself, and a lot of the different maps also as to where the Chinese territory started and where the Indian territory started, was one of the major reasons for such conflicts. And also the fact that the terrain in these areas, specifically once we've reached we were about to enter the Tibetan plateau, and like the transitional areas, these areas are not fixed at one position. They keep on moving. So there is also a geographical context behind it because of the constant motion of these areas, of these rocks. That also creates an additional challenge as to how should these areas be governed and how these areas should be patrolled. Because what would happen is that there would be a few pieces of rocks which would be considered Indian territory, and within a year's time they would move to what we would call Chinese territory. So this also puzzles a lot of security experts as to how to deal with such a dynamic challenge.
yeah, I mean, I think the LAC wasn't even like officially named till the 1990s.
Yes.
Both sides would conveniently just sort of refer it to the border areas. The Indian ITBP would do what it sort of refers to as their own sort of perception based patrolling. That's also what the army does. The PLA would also patrol to what their perception is. And you know, these are mountain areas. Ladakh is, after all, a desert. So, you know, maybe some storms or some thunderstorm or could move some rocks here and there. So, your perception of your
Yeah.
border areas also changes. And that can obviously lead to clashes because you're patrolling to the maximum point which you think is your country's territory. Yeah. So, you know,
Glacial
it's,
movement also
yeah,
brings in a lot of change in those areas,
yeah.
because it takes like a lot of geography which you always considered your part
Hmm.
or your territory to a
Yeah.
different location.
So I mean, neither side had till very recently even formally demarcated LAC on their own maps. So how do you make a comprehensive policy security policy framework for a place that didn't even find convenience for you to be naming it
Yes.
till the 1990s. So that's one interesting fact about the LAC. It's that till the 90s, neither the Indians nor the Chinese had great interest in naming it or patrolling it beyond their perception or all of that.
Yeah.
So there's I think the Galwan Valley clash is a pivoting moment in 2020 in
Yeah.
the sense that you at least have interest in demarcating all those areas on both sides. The Indians have made a lot more effort to sort of demarcate different like access routes, etc., and label them as what points that we can patrol and all of that. The Indians have also essentially gone a step further to rebuild our infrastructure in that area. Infrastructure by the Indian side is a uh, more lot more enhanced now than it was maybe in the 80s or the 90s. Yet it remains inferior to the Chinese, who have been planning like border villages both in the McMahon line side and the Ladakh side. The military infrastructure of the Chinese is way stronger. They have been drilling railway lines through the Tibetan mountains so that you can move troops, persons, logistics, weapons much quicker. So there's a disparity in our capabilities to rebuild infrastructure. We need to be honest about that even to ourselves.
Hmm.
But I think it's only there. This perception and the ability to patrol these areas was a recent trend that came after the clash in 2020. Now, this could have very well led to a sort of competitive military infrastructure building which could always spark the dangers of a conflict. So I think this recent meeting between the Indian National Security Advisor and the Chinese Foreign Minister is very important, because now you have two nuclear sides rapidly building military infrastructure along the side of not an international border, an internationally disputed or disputed like line which has to be demarcated, right? So this is so much more critical now, because you want to stop digging into this bottomless pit of both countries just continuously developing their military infrastructure without any confidence building exercises. So I think the likely next outcome, which is going to be a positive outcome of this meeting, is that maybe now you can have the Indian Army and the ITBP doing more confidence building measures with the Chinese PLA. You can have maybe their company commanders or whatever you have on the ground level, platoon commanders, interact and coordinate maybe with the company commanders and platoon commanders of their Chinese equivalents. So I think that's important. That is critical to avert the possibility of conflict. And because the area is still not fully clearly defined, it's also important to jointly administer it. It may sound idealistic, but it's better than going to war.
Absolutely.
That's my view.
I totally agree with you on that. I feel the way the British Raj left the country, it created such a geopolitical nightmare for all the neighbors that we're still picking up the pieces even after 76, 77 years. And that somehow brings us to how was this border conceived in the first place? What were the reasons behind it? Raj, can you take over that?
I mean, like I said, the McMahon line, for example, was conceived in a meeting between the British representatives and the representatives of Tibet, and both stakeholders in this situation now, the Republic of India and the Chinese Communist Party, were obviously not represented in that meeting,
Exactly.
because that was a negotiation between the British and the Tibetans.
Yeah.
So that led to the creation of the McMahon line, and we sort of just inherited that. And I was watching a video on this very recently by the Print, where a factor about a McMahon line being drawn with a very thick ballpoint pen was mentioned, that even that the tip of the ballpoint pen can take about 20-30 kilometers
Yeah.
of territory here and there. So how do you demarcate such huge tracts of land through a thick tip pen? And just the stroke of your pen can have such significant
Yeah, that
geopolitical consequences.
that gives us a context as to why the scramble for Africa or the Middle East later on, and the borders that were created by the European colonial masters left such a huge
I
geopolitical
mean,
tragedy.
that you continuously
Yeah,
see, like
yeah.
poor border planning and ill-advised border management was a a disturbing legacy that stayed with the Indian subcontinent
Yes.
and continues to stay with us today, because Bengal was so randomly partitioned. Uh, Parts of Punjab saw the worst of the partition in
Violence, huh?
19 in the 19 late 1940s, and
Nepal also,
even
we have
yeah,
so much tension now with the Nepalese government on the side
yeah,
of Uttarakhand.
the Lipu Lake areas
Lipulekh, Kali River
and yeah.
issues.
So there's poor border management and planning. A lot of that accountability lies with the colonial administration, and maybe to their discredit, they did not make enough effort to demarcate those areas
Of course.
appropriately, keeping along local complexities and regional complexities in mind. But I mean,
Yeah.
we also don't have their perspective in mind.
Yeah,
Not
it is said that
so.
Radcliffe was suffering from the cases of from the case of diarrhea when he was, drawing out the map of independent India and Pakistan. So imagine the kind of effort he would have put in, because his energy and his concentration would have just been at, like, ensuring that
Yeah.
he stays alive in the subcontinent.
Right. So, I mean, there's a lot of historical trivia to all this also.
Yeah.
The McMahon line was actually, it played a very important role in the Second World War. The British heavily fortified it to prevent the Japanese from coming in through like Myanmar and Rangoon and all those areas. So, it was obviously to their advantage having a kind of demarcated line. At the very least, a boundary which you know, which you to the points that you know where to defend them. But having said that, there's just so much more that was left uncovered, untethered for to the last minute. I mean, the poor planning in the last few decades of the British saw so much more randomized divisions which kept in mind no cultural complexity.
Yeah.
You have essentially Amritsar and Lahore lying in two different countries. I don't want to say make a controversial statement and say that we should take over Lahore, but they're so much like more culturally similar than uh, uh,
There,
Amritsar might be to any other Indian city.
yeah, yeah. It
So
said that after the partition, no one on either side of the border ever thought that there would be like, such a big division that would be created, and such fencing would be created, because specifically on the Pakistani side,
yeah.
like the people over there thought that they would like eventually come back, or like get some things, get some of their possessions back, and even on the Bengal side. But as anything that geopolitics have like taught us is that as countries become richer, as they become more militarized, they would always take steps in order to ensure that their security is prioritized. And
And there's so much evidence to believe that
I'm getting a call from Kyrgyzstan. It's crazy, bro. Like how?
yeah, I really want to.
Yeah.
Or
What the hell?
to divert for a second, I really want to speak about tech regulation
Yeah.
and cross-border content sharing and all of
Yeah.
that. It's interesting that you get a call from
Right
Kyrgyzstan
now, when we're
because
having such an
yeah,
intense conversation, why
yeah,
am I getting a call from Kyrgyzstan?
that do you want to take that?
No, why? Why would I take that?
These topics have been weighing down on my head, and so we want to do an episode on that
Yeah.
also. But where were we before this?
Yeah, we were talking about the idea that cultural
Yeah,
similarity
yeah.
and
There's
homogeneous groups were
yeah.
not really considered, and a line was drawn just on the basis of the religious identity.
There is a lot of evidence to believe that Jinnah actually wanted to spend a lot of time in his Mumbai home
Yeah.
after the partition. There is recorded letters of him writing to the Indian ambassadors and even Nehru requesting them to take care of it, and how he sourced the best Italian furniture for that bungalow. So there's plenty of reason to believe that the lines drawn by the partition were not assumed to be as severe as
And as
they
permanent.
turned out to be.
Yeah.
The wedge that was drawn on linguistic lines, ethnic lines, now people say even on genetic lines, because
Like
now Pakistanis try to trace their heritage sometimes from the Ottomans, sometimes from the Turks, sorry,
from the
sometimes from the
Arabs.
Ottomans, sometimes from the Arabs,
Yeah.
based on their convenience. I'm sure they in the 70s during the Iranian Revolution, they must have started calling themselves
No, no,
Persians
no, that's
also.
not gonna happen because Persians are Shias. So,
Yeah.
and now the Pakistanis have also started saying that Jinnah converted to Sunni Islam
I
at the
mean,
final stage.
that's again, that's up to conjecture. We are
Yeah,
nobody
exactly,
to
of
sort
course.
of comment on that.
Yeah.
But I do think that there's a lot more of historical research that can be done
Yeah.
on the negative implications of poor border management. Like the outcome of it is so grossly visible in the then India East Pakistan border, which is now the India Bangladesh border, and it's so incredibly complex that there are parts in, for example, Meghalaya, the Dauki area, where there are houses through which like the border basically cuts through the middle. There's like big boulders which are placed along the line by the BSF that somebody says, okay, that's India, that's Bangladesh. Fishermen from both sides basically have an Indian flag and a Bangladeshi flag to indicate to whichever border agency which country they are from. Typically, people have identifications from both countries also. So how do you allot the idea of a nationality to a culture that is so much more
Yeah.
older than the concept of a modern nation state?
Yes.
I mean, Chittagong and Sylhet and all these places were so crucial to Bengal.
Bengali Muslims
So
specifically.
exactly.
It is said that
So
during the time of the Bengal Sultanate, and historically the area when it was governed by the Muslims, they had access to what we see today as Bihar. Most of East Bihar, like specifically the Mithila region, Odisha, a lot of parts of Odisha, then the Chatgaon tracts, of course, all the way till Rakhine state or the Arakan state in Myanmar. So historically, these areas were accessible to the Bengali Muslims. But after the partition, a lot of Bengali nationalists raise this a lot of times. They say Bangladeshi nationalists. I would like to call them Bangladeshi nationalists. They say that so much of territory which was just accessible to Bengali Muslims was just taken away from them, and they were essentially restricted in this narrow area. Given, and that is why there is like such a huge demographic concentration of people in like such a small area. It's like I would like to call Gaza Strip I would like to call Bangladesh the Gaza Strip of the Indian subcontinent. A less restricted Gaza Strip.
Yeah, I
would
don't know
say.
if I fully agree with
No,
that.
even I don't.
analogy.
I don't. It's a wrong analogy. But
Ga-
but it's surrounded by all the sides, and if say India has a hard time governing the borders, and if India feels that Bangladesh, is trying to threaten its sovereignty, there could be a point where cutting Bangladesh off would be extremely easy. What do you think?
I mean, I think that India-Bangladesh relations have been so stable
Yeah,
over the
fair enough.
last few decades. They were very proximate in the Awami League government, but even under the Khaleda Zia administration, it was not particularly bad. Like India and Bangladesh, there have been instances in the early 2000s of,
The violence,
I think
Doki area also, like
some
14,
BSF men were
14
killed by
BSF men were killed
the
by.
then Bangladesh Rangers.
Yeah.
But despite that, I think India and Bangladesh have by and large remained, if not peaceful, then working in partnership on many issues. India is again not a very expansionist neighbor as compared to some other countries in the subcontinent. So I think Bangladesh has less to worry about. Even in this Muhammad Yunus chief executive type of setup, India is trying to partner up. I think the foreign secretary visited
Nee,
Bangladesh.
I was just talking
a few
about a
months.
hypothetical situation. I'm not saying that Bangladesh is the Gaza Strip of India, but if India wants to use its full military capability, maybe, who knows?
I think,
I'm joking.
dude,
I'm
I think that that setup is so hard to even imagine for me
Yeah.
that I'm not disrespecting the hypotheses.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is that I don't even I find it hard to imagine.
Yeah.
That may be my limitation.
Fair enough.
So,
Again,
but yeah,
this is just hypothesis. I would not want that to happen to anyone, because
yeah.
what Israel has done in Palestine is equal to a genocide,
Yeah.
and I would
I mean,
not
yeah.
I would not call it something else.
Yeah, but I mean, today we are
Yeah.
focusing on South Asia again.
Exactly.
So I think if we want to do some solution building here with respect to our border disputes, it's not a hot take. Many Indian experts will say, okay, that we should now just freeze the border as it is. LOC becomes the international border. LAC becomes demarcated as the international border. But it's so politically contested
Yeah.
that whichever party does that will have given their opposition party lifelong ammunition that they have legitimized the control of foreign powers on your territory.
It could be the Yitzhak Rabin movement of
Yeah.
that politician
Yeah.
from these different areas.
That man would have, for the rest of his life, made himself and his family and his descendants villains in India for having legitimized control of the Chinese, maybe on some areas of the LAC, and maybe so freezing the border in these areas, it's such a complicated debate. Although on many occasions that seems like the only prudent thing to do, because the other alternative is that if you want to demarcate territories that are not in your control, you stake claim on them, the only way to do it is expel Chinese troops from there, right?
Yeah.
So you have to have a like conventional war, and can we afford one? Do we need one?
No,
At
man.
what cost?
I'm a proponent of having good relations with the Chinese.
Mhm.
I feel that it's high time that the two countries
Yeah.
forget their differences and just
Yeah.
freeze the borders where they are. Because what I see is a very disturbing pattern. I feel that there is a lot of instigation on the Western side to put these two neighbors against each other, so that
Yeah.
there is another Ukraine Russia type of situation that's been created, and the only people who benefit the most are the greatest antagonists of the Indian subcontinent. It's the Western world, the Anglosphere.
Dude, yeah, imagine being the military industrial complex in the US,
Yes.
looking at all the border disputes that are existing in South Asia,
सबको लड़ा दो
and
भाई.
thinking that how much money can I make from
चलो
this?
लड़ा दो भाई, सबको लड़ा दो भाई.
Imagine if like India and China were, God forbid, hypothetically going to war. I guess these Boeings and all these companies would
भाई
be the
रीपर
greatest.
ड्रोन्स, इंडिया इतने रीपर
Yeah.
ड्रोन्स क्यों खरीद रहा है भाई?
Yeah.
क्यों खरीद रहे हैं ड्रोन्स? हम लोग
Dude,
Yeah.
You're pitching people to at least build a stance that builds this anxiety in people, that people want to keep restocking on their weapon
Exactly.
supply. And if that is done to the point of irreversible extents, then I think a lot of Quad NATO countries, they would benefit from
Of
that.
course,
And
bro.
they have a very bad track record of sort of putting countries like Ukraine in the front
Or
to
Iran,
bear the
Iraq war.
brunt.
There's so many examples.
So I
Just
think I think we would benefit greatly from solving these border disputes. China and India would benefit greatly from better relations with each other. There's despite my disrespect for the PLA and their actions in some areas, nobody can deny the economic prowess the Chinese hold. In many
also
areas,
the
they are.
cultural exchange that has happened between the two countries
Yeah,
for thousands of years.
yeah,
So that cannot be taken away.
yeah,
I feel also how much the Chinese and Indians have suffered because of the white man, the Anglosphere, and that is like a common ground for the two of us to start.
Yeah, and I mean, look at the pillars on which you're trying to build the modern economy. You want electric vehicles, so so many critical minerals are refined
Yeah.
almost exclusively in China, and they have decades worth of competitive advantage as compared to us. So if anybody thinks that we can beat the Chinese manufacturing story while staying on hostile terms with them, that man is coming from a uninformed line of sight.
Absolutely.
I think the interest for both countries is in cooperation. I think the government of India realizes that much better than we do. The Modi government itself, despite its strong national security stance, has been trying to warm up to the Chinese. To their credit, we have started rebuilding ties with them. There is nothing which we will gain out of military conflict. To the credit of our troops, they will put up a brave fight hypothetically if it happens, but we will still lose money, we will still lose lives. So there's a much better outcome for South Asia in cooperation of China and India.
Yes,
This
absolutely.
shouldn't be a very hot take. I mean, Chris is advocating for peace like an outdated idea now.
भाई मेरे को एक चीज समझ में नहीं आती नहीं आई टोटली एग्री विद यू बट इफ यू could just sit down and take into account the kind of damage that the colonial rule has done to the whole world order,
Yeah.
it's crazy. Like then you will understand that instead of fighting amongst each other, we could just like look the other way and like just give them
Yeah.
their receipts.
I think
Give them the receipts.
I
Give the
think
British Empire their receipts. Give
one
Americans
thing
their receipts.
one thing that really annoyed the West NATO
Yeah.
centric part of the world very recently, and to the credit of a lot of emerging economies in the world, was the recently concluded BRICS summit,
Yeah, I've heard.
which happened in Russia. It was so well attended. The Indians attended it, the Chinese attended it, and if
Brazilians
if the
attended it.
Indians and Chinese are attending something, already half of the world is attending it.
Yeah.
And many economies from Africa and many leaders from Africa have started coming up and calling out the West on their sort of will to maintain status quo in Africa, while the Chinese have gone down and conducted infrastructure projects and given renewable energy to the Africans, given power to the Africans, both power as in the electricity power and political power,
Yeah.
if you want to derive too many double meanings out of the statement. So even the Africans are cozying up to this part of the bloc, and Africa is politically, strategically very significant. It's a resource-rich continent. It is geographically very strategically placed. It has access to the Mediterranean, to the Pacific, to the Atlantic. It's like a trade center sort of, if it has to be, if the resources of Africa are put to good use. So
I'm so sorry.
yeah.
I'm a bit distracted right now, but I just got a message from that guy who was calling me from Kyrgyzstan. It says, credit card has been used in fraudulent activities. For more details, please press 9. I think John Garricky Kripa bhai. No Dubai. Hello, dear customer. Bro, it's crazy, bro. Look at this. It's like a full scam that's going
Just
on.
ignore it. So very recently, I think the government has changed everybody's ringtone to alert them about
Yes, about these
fraudulent
scams that are happening.
police
We
and
can do a
CBI
whole episode
scams.
on
Yeah,
that
yeah.
as well.
I want to do one on
Yeah.
tech policy and governance of these technical platforms so bad. That should be maybe our next episode.
Yes.
So I think, long story short, let's just conclude our conversation here in the sense that if we solve our LAC dispute and our McMahon line perception issues, we will have for the military industrial complex shut down one entire flashpoint from which interests that would benefit from conflict uh, can try to stir disturbance.
Absolutely.
If these areas are demarcated well, and if we can build a working relationship with the Chinese troops on the ground, we will forever have built such a stable environment there that no interventionist and no military industrial complex backed regime can come and stir up conflict in India. And parties on the left and right both will agree in India also that the, uh, the foreign powers do try to meddle in with our intelligence affairs and our internal affairs. That's not even a hot take anymore again.
Yeah.
So it's just in our best interest to demarcate and build a cooperative border guarding framework with the Chinese. What that will do is it may prevent future conflict for centuries to come. So I think that's my conclusion.
Yeah, with the rise of Elon Musk's and all these extremely influential capitalist-driven entities in the United States, I feel, again, it's a hot take. I feel they are just like the 21st century versions of East India Company.
No, very much so.
And they have their own agendas towards these different countries, because after a very long time do we see that a businessman, a business tycoon, and also can you call Elon Musk a technocrat?
Sort of. I
Yeah.
guess, yeah.
After a very long time, you're seeing like these private entities gaining so much influence and power in the Western Anglosphere.
Yeah.
So
But I mean, to the credit of the Trump government,
Yeah.
who Elon Musk is going to be a part of, the Donald Trump campaign strategy has had this as an integral part, that why is the US meddling with so many internal
Fair enough.
affairs of so many countries? It is only if he can exert his will strongly enough in front of the deep state or the intelligence agencies will that victory really come. So Trump was recalling an incident of his own presidency where some generals were briefing him that okay, so earlier we were against Al Qaeda, but now they're using Al Qaeda to fight ISIS.
Yeah.
And Trump got so confused that is this really an American problem after a point? And because if it stops being an American problem, why should the US spend so many of its tax dollars funding wars in the Middle East? It's honestly a disservice to
And
the American
as
citizen
we
also.
see, the Al Qaeda affiliated group HTS like literally took power in Syria, and now organizations like CNN are saying that this blazer wearing former Salafi jihadist has come up and taken power. He is going to
No way.
Yeah, whoa.
No way CNN turned an ex-Al Qaeda guy into a blazer-wearing revolutionary. Dude.
Oh my god, bro! You guys are
American-
a joke, man.
Western-
Americans, Western
Western
world, the
liberals-
deep state, joke.
No, Western liberals can really win the naivety and stupidity competitions many times over. Like this is they turned. Next thing you can have this HTS commander, and if the Democrat governments come back, maybe you will have this HTS commander wearing a pride flag and he has a Black Lives Matter face, and then US drones are bombing all the Shias and the Christians in Syria with the Black Lives Matter and a pride flag drone. So that is what Democrat interventionism looks like, right?
Yeah, I mean, from the same logic that the West is using right now and CNN is using right now, we could say that Yahya Sinwar was also a rebel leader who was like, who was on the right path and was representing their people and was also a legitimate leader. He was a dreaded terrorist, don't get me wrong, but it's the same logic. It's just that you did not, put him at that elevation is because he was against Israel. I mean, and you know that HTS is not going to go against Israel. They're not going to act against Israeli interests. And what has happened again is that Israel has already started occupying more territory inside Syria. So yeah, congratulations on that. And I think we should conclude again. Poor border management.
Yeah. We
Back to
should-
the the
we
thing
will
that we start
we
from.
will conclude our
Yeah,
conversation
yeah.
like a Sigma S Jaishankar edit where both our eyes have that electricals, because every time S Jaishankar calls out the West and the NATO, and there's those Sigma Jaishankar edit reels.
God
I think
damn
he
it.
acknowledged one of those also
You
with
need to stop doing
with
that,
with
bro.
the lightning coming out
Yeah,
of
yeah,
his
yeah.
eyes,
Stop doing that.
or those glasses and
Uh,
a spliff.
yeah, yeah.
Anyway,
Chalo.
thanks for
Thank you
listening
so
in.
much, man. Love you guys. Bye.
Bye bye.